Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be starting our webinar series, Go Digital, with today's topic being artificial intelligence and machine learning, the future of knowledge delivery and learning. Hosted by Steph, who's based out of London, who heads our EMEA and APAC region for Impulses. Without much delays, ladies and gentlemen, over to Steph to start off with this session. And certain rules, please feel free to ask your question. You can type in the Q&A box and we will take it up post the session. You can also raise your digital hand. We can enable you to ask the question directly if you would like to not type but read out your question to Steph. He's also supported by two of our team members, Susmita and Ravi. Welcome once again to everyone. Over to Steph.
Thank you very much, Vinay, for that introduction. Just firstly, importantly, just check I'm visible and audible, hopefully. Good, I assume so. So yes, welcome everyone to, thanks Vinay, thanks to confirm. So welcome everyone to, I'll go to, had our last episode last week, which was very interesting. We had a discussion with Ken Brooks, the Chief Content Officer for Wiley. And it kind of like joins this session up today, really, because we mentioned there about that publishing workflow optimization, and we looked at sort of and discussed a little bit around adaptive type of technologies and where publishing and generally that direction is going. So I mean, this is what I'd like to cover today. We've been looking at digital transformation for some of the earlier episodes, so I think I wanted to focus more on the AI and machine learning aspects, but actually, it's not so much about like, should we do it for the technology's sake? It's not so much that. It's more really about the business drivers and I guess the enablement to do that. So I think what I'd like to focus a little bit more on this session is looking at that workflow for publishers, for corporates, that content structure, ways to optimize that, ways to put the AI enablers in place, and also, how to be better prepared to, I guess, provide these more adaptive and personalized learning techniques, because, it's already out there. We know that we are in our everyday lives. We experience that even in terms of our leisure pursuits like Netflix and things like that. We are getting recommended stuff. So without further ado, let's crack on. So thank you very much for your patience while I work through this webinar. And as Vinay says, any questions, please put them through. And myself, and we have our two Innovation Hub members, Ravi and also Susmita, who can also, at the end of this webinar, in the question and answer session, take up some of your more tech questions, let's say. Okay, so let me just enable the PowerPoint to move. Before we do that, let me just give you a very brief corporate update. I think it's important we do that because we have some new members joining our webinar today in the series. And I mean, Impulses, I mean, we're basically, we are a company that has a purpose: spreading knowledge through technology. And actually that word knowledge is becoming really important. I mean, for Impulses, it's always been important, but it's becoming really important every day for everyone. And this is kind of ties in nicely with the theme of what today's topic is really. Just a quick couple of minutes here just on what we do. So, we're a technology company. We provide solutions and services, servicing education, publishers, science, technical, medical, associations, corporate entities. So our technology and solutions are agnostic to all, actually, but we have our main core platforms, which is iPublish Central Scholar and iPublish Central Health. And Scholar is all for the corporate side of the business and publishing side. And Health we have for our, if you like, our learning platform, development platform, hospitals and healthcare professionals. But essentially, and I'll talk a little bit about that technology in a second. The other things we do, we also, being as we've been around for nearly 20 years now, are extremely good at building bespoke technology. So we have a number of practices in-house. We have, MarkLogic, we have Magenta, we have, obviously all the normal tech stack you'd see being provided. So all the PHP, LAMP, Java, all .NET and stuff like that. And we are able to build to bespoke and also provide engineers. So if you like, extended teams. So we provide anything from one engineer to a team of engineers to all the way up to offshore development. And we have a number of very well-established models here in our Impulsus offices, servicing some very high-profile clients and into hundreds of engineers. And we also, of course, provide those content enablement services. So, be that, anything quite simply from taking an input and providing you multiple outputs. So let's just say taking a PDF, providing you EPUB, EPUB3, XML, web ready, print ready, everything. We have our own automation tools where we provide that one process batch output, or a simple exchange, a one-for-one. And we also are providing courseware interactive services. So taking all the raw assets and building those raw assets into interactive e-learning. So level 1, level 2, level 3 and beyond. So everything all the way up to high level simulation, which ties in very nicely with what we do with our platforms, as well as doing the content. So, and just a little bit of on the platform itself, it's end to end, does everything, ebooks, journals, magazines, video libraries, audio libraries, LMS solution. It's modular. So we have a lot of engagements where it just starts off as ebooks, but as the publisher or corporates evolve with their business and markets, then so does the platform. So simply because it's a microservices platform, we can do that. We can enable and switch on technology. So military grade type DRM, SAR DRM, we have everything online, offline, and seamless user navigation and experience. So of course, analytics are there at the back end. We have an access, a super admin access that corporates and publishers will use, and will enable them to do everything from loading to looking at their content and making sure it's the right permissions. They can basically enable that, how the market should use it. And also all the analytics, of course, are very important, which we cover. Mentioned a bit about microservices. It's essentially for our flexibility, because it allows us to scale up quickly. So, and we can also, if you think about it, where we have some scenarios where there are organizations who have their own technology infrastructure in place, heavily invested, and but there are components that they don't really want to take care of in-house because of their, let's say, technology headache that surrounds it. And that's our job, to take care of headaches. I suppose we're that like painkiller, if you like, to ease all that, because essentially we can integrate any part of our technology to that ecosystem. An example would be our e-readers. So everything online, offline, we can provide that e-reader branded and give that sort of experience with all the personalization, everything. Take care of all the browser updates, the vulnerabilities in the cloud. We can do everything. Some of our logos, just to give you an idea of where we're dealing with globally, but over 400 organizations we deal with, over 250 platforms, live platforms, science, technical, medical. So you'll see a lot of brands and logos that you recognize. Very large in the association market as well. And of course in corporate, as I said, it's agnostic to everything. So that's a quick roundup, really. We always do that just because of anyone who's new to this webinar. So thank you for bearing with that. And actually we'll come to our next segment, really, which is basically for the future of knowledge delivery and learning in regarding artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's appropriate that, I think, we start off the data side of things, because we've all, I think, come to hear that expression, data is the new gold, and like gold, data, I guess, data is a commodity, right? So, in its structure of data, I mean, on its, basically in terms of how it sits, unless you mine that data, unless you refine it, unless you process it, we don't know what we're analyzing. So that's the point with data. And of course, the data sets are becoming bigger, hence the name big data. But actually, one of the interesting things is, the big data, okay, that could be something that we could talk about. But actually, I think it's more on the big insights, certainly from the side of Impulsus's business. I mean, this is exactly, and I'll come on to that, why we're looking at AI and ML and NLP and all these enablers for our business. But essentially what we're talking about here is really that process to enable. So, data in its raw state is not as valuable. So to obtain value, we need to process it. So if we think about those large companies, we all know the Alphabet, who and all the companies, their organizations they own, and Amazon and Apple, Facebook, Microsoft. I mean, a lot of companies become smart in the sense of the data side of things, and the processing, the data mining, and science side of it. So it's not going to go away. In fact, it's going to be more compounded. Why is that? Because essentially, this is where we're headed, right? So, you know, the structure and growth of data and content has been huge, right? I mean, the last 2 years, I'm sure some of you are aware of these facts, but just worth just mentioning it. The last 2 years, 90% of the data in the world was generated, right? So that's significant in itself. And if we look ahead of our time, which is coming up, right? Another 5 years' time, we're going to be generating 163 zettabytes of data annually. So we don't use that word zettabyte much. Maybe the tech guys do, but I mean, I'm on the commercial side. But anyway, you know, 1 zettabyte, look at that, 1 trillion gigabytes or 1 billion terabytes, whatever way you want to look at this. You know, and that's 10 times the data currently being created. So that's compounded and huge, right? And if there's another, which we'll talk about as well, we are also in the world of IoT, Internet of Things. Everything became smarter, everything became more enabled. You know, by 2025, that's 4,800 interactions per day. One interaction to a human every 18 seconds to an individual. So that's huge, right? I mean, literally walking around, we're interacting with sensors, and that's what it's basically telling us. And, you know, 100 billion IoT devices, and you think, what? So what? It's hardware. So what? What's the big deal? The problem is it's generating huge amounts of data, behavioral analytics, the stuff that is really key. And this is the next bit we're coming to. That stuff is unstructured. So all that social media, all the pictures, documents, basically everything that is not held in a structured format. So if we think about structure, relational databases, and that's nothing new, right? Relational databases, and even if you put a business intelligence tool on top of that, because it can make the data a bit more smarter and graphically present something to you. Like I want to compare data in South America to data in Europe, and specifically for this time period, for this type of sector, and for these type of customers. And then you put that in and it gives you that answer. But then we have to know what we're asking, right? That's structured data. We have to know what we're asking for so that relational database can go and get it for us. Unstructured, we have no idea what's in that pile of unstructured data. And essentially, I mean, that is, I think, where, you know, we're talking about the insights. I mentioned that in the beginning, didn't I? About not big data, but big insights. This is the clue to it, right? So how do we get the insights? Well, you know, if 80 to 90% of data is becoming unstructured, and you see the strap line of the slide below, I won't go through them because it's obvious to you guys what that is, then that's what we're talking about. And if we look at, I suppose, these disruptive technologies, I mean, one can say it's helping and one can say it's not helping, because a lot of these technologies are, again, driving all that behavioral side of use case, right? So, I mean, you know, in terms of, and these other things like IoT I've mentioned, all that sensors and so on, infrastructure. So what's enabling all this is like the change in infrastructure. So with cloud services, everything's on the go, everything's 24/7, everything's ready. Bandwidth is another big one, hence the 5G, a little bit topical at the moment in the UK, but anyway, but the bandwidth is a huge thing. So even I mean, I'm going to sort of show a little bit of my age here, but some of you in the audience may resonate with it or not, I don't know. But, you know, when we had the dial-up, right, and that beautiful noise the dial-up used to make at home, and we would sit there waiting for that dial-up. Come on, give us that site we want to look at. I'm prepared to wait 30 seconds for that site to load, no problem. And that was so wow factor. We're talking, obviously, long number of years back, but that's all changed. With broadband changed a lot of things. So infrastructure, disruptive technologies, it'll always be there. What's the next thing coming along? Well, 5G is already, or 6G, whatever, you know, there's other things coming along, digital trends, you know, all this stuff's helping the world progress in much faster, clever, smart, intelligent ways. So that's something that why I'm talking about, not just about what is the science of AI and ML. I mean, there'll be enough data scientists probably even in our audience to tell us that. But I'm talking more on the business side of it, because I feel we need to look at this as a business first driven objective, rather than a technology objective, right? So that's how we should approach it. And in fact, how Impulsus is approached its own, and I'll come to that as I discuss it. So there's been a significant impact of AI already. Without going through the obvious, you know, from the Siri to the driverless cars. You know, we're not there yet, of course, fully on that, but it's there as a technology for sure, once it gets more refined. And if you think about everything that's around us in those sensors that we use, we're getting used to it. And there's a funny thing that's happening. There's a very thin line between the online world and the offline world. Now, some of you guys may remember, of course, many years ago, when I slammed this laptop down, that's it, done. There is no more online, you know, when there was no like infrastructure there to support it. Cloud services weren't there for the regular person, let's say. So yeah, it's disconnect from the world, right? Same way as a print book, actually. If you think about it, when I buy a print book in a shop, you've got my analytics from the point of purchase, but once I'm out of there with that print book, you've got no idea what I'm doing. Maybe I don't even look at the book, who knows? But you know, what I'm saying is that division between that line is completely now blurred, right? So, and it's going to become more blurred. Hence that couple of slides ago, I mentioned about that 4,800 IoT interactions a day. Exactly that, because you're just interacting, not even if you can help it. The stuff that we're all wearing is capturing data. That's interesting and produces another argument for another time. And, you know, probably we should look at that in some other later series on ethical implications and all that. But we're not here to discuss that today, of course. So that's kind of like the impact of AI all around us. We're not going to go away from that. So we're coming more to now the topical area of this webinar. I just set the scene there because no conversational debate or discussion can be there without the data side of it and the stuff that is really pressurizing that, like a pressure cooker, if you like. That data is exploding already. So basically, what does it mean? So, you know, you need to make those smart, critical, you know, very qualitative decisions into understanding not just kind of what it says there, the what, but the why, right? So, and all around us, we're shaped by these different segments. And there'll be more to the segments. There'll be, you know, further sort of filtered out from those segments. You've got, of course, your own customers. You've got your own internal employees. You've got supply chain. You've got the different formats. You've got the external influences. Even competition can be included there because clearly, you know, that's a major worry if they are getting smarter and using all the tools and enablers available to get to the market much more faster and more precisely. The end user is critical in everything. They make that decision and they get as we do. Do we enjoy AI or not? Probably don't even know it because we're surrounded by it. As I say, well, you know, watching Netflix, they seem to know obviously what to feed you, and they can change the jacket cover to suit, you know, what you might sort of interpret as something more pleasing to you or whatever. So that's let's call it you know, efficiency in that knowledge enablement. And in the publishing world, let's say, I mean, it clearly is getting accelerated. You know, in the education side, I think, you know, there's been some reports around that it's expected to grow by nearly 50% in terms of the use of AI. I'm talking about during the year of 2021. And obviously COVID is a discussion topic. We can't miss that word, can we? We're all stuck. Look at me, I'm stuck here doing this presentation. But you know, it's what it is what it is, and you know, COVID is there and has accelerated absolutely a lot of situations. So there's not really any going backwards here, you know. So what are we going to get more smarter with this going forwards? It gives a tremendous opportunity, though, to capture, if you think everything if you just look at the education side, from kindergarten to higher ed, and then when you've done your higher ed, you go to your corporate training, and you go into the corporate world. All that is end to end. It's cradle to grave kind of thing, right? So I think it's a tremendous opportunity for everyone. If we can look at this next slide. Yeah, a little bit texty, but I think it's important. There are meanings behind every bit of text, really. I mean, you know, in the sense of, I've squared them in these zones. I mean, some of them may kind of filter in one or two, but it's okay. For knowledge empowerment, right? So how do we get that? We need enablers, you know, the machine learning and natural learning parts. And, you know, this is, you know, the kind of faster processing side, the algorithms we need to train data, you know, train and treat data. Give metadata its relevance. It's an important thing, metadata. So I'll come to that again in this presentation. That discoverability and that visibility is crucial. And if you look at then product enrichment and efficiency. So I think in these terms, this is more for the internal purposes of any organization, a corporate, be it corporate or publisher or, you know, any entity, because it's all data you know, it's not just for publishing, it's for everyone. And optimizing that workflow. So looking at how that can be done. And if you think about product bundling, if you think about, in a sense, not just the sort of traditional product bundling, I'm talking about smart product bundling in a way of profiling, thinking about who your end user is and trying to categorize that content and break that content down in different ways. You can only do that when you tag data appropriately. So this auto text tagging and formatting and this content translation, this business enablement. Now, this is really actually the square you kind of want to look at in a way first to execute your best decisions, your analytics, your smart way of you're looking through the kaleidoscope. So when you shake it, everything looks clear to you, right? So you're only going to be able to do that with tools. You know, I mean, it's gone too big now to not to do it without, and that's why even we all need more and more reports. We all need more and more. We need faster ways of doing it, and we need to be served it. So I don't want to sort of think of the answer ahead of it. Like I need to know what I gave that example, what South America did against Europe, and I need to know this answer to it. Maybe I don't know what the question is actually. What I need to do is see what it can serve me and produce coming the way we've trained that data and giving me smart, intelligent outlooks. Predictive analysis. Otherwise, how are you going to stay ahead of the market, serve your customer, the same way Impulses is doing. I'll come to that. We have to, we're a technology company, so we're partnering publishers, corporates, we're serving. So the only way we can do that is to ensure we understand and we're ahead of that curve as well, which is why I've been in business for 20 years and we understand that game. That personalized and recommendation part is that actually absolutely that end user kind of like that specific plan you're given. Me, the simplest plan I gave you, the Netflix, that's a plan they've given me tonight to watch something I never thought, oh, that film looks good. You know, give me something to do for the next couple of hours. And you know, if you think about then customizing that individual assessment on their strengths and needs, how are we going to do that, right? And if we are going to talk about tools, that summarization, the automatically given questions and answers, virtual tutors and simulation. I'll come on to that, but I'll just put it into that box so you're aware of it, guys, right? So kind of comes into this innovation lab, and I've got a couple of my members of our team with us who are part of our core team on the innovation hub we've got. It's very important as a technology company we have it. So we've been doing this for the last 18 months. We've been exploring technologies. We've been, looking at the AI enablers. So this layer you'll see with, of course, the knowledge graph that we need to have, types of knowledge graphs, the metadata tagger, and user profiling. So I'll come on to that because we'll explain a bit more. And then what solutions and services we can derive from that. So, I'll come and explain to the part about text summarization and automatically generating questions and answer and recommendation engines, personalization, very key going forward. And a little bit later into the year, we'll be launching our SAM technology services, which is this AI engineered services. So it's helping to explain in and around this webinar, of course, but essentially it's a topic that I think, it's kind of like understood in a way because there are enablers that give the outputs. So, knowledge graphs, again, we all, I think, pretty much heard of and know what knowledge graphs are. So I'm not here to explain that today. As I say, we've got enough, even Google to help us do that. So, millions of objects, millions of facts, and those objects and relationships between them and what the intent of them is, right? So how are we going to capture that? So there's different types of knowledge graphs depending on what our data is. So of course we started in the medical sector because we had a large turnkey business. And of course we've launched a business in the hospital sector. And we've had a lot of experience in that area of health. So we looked at the SNOMED knowledge graphs and of course Google knowledge graphs and so on. So our team is fully immersed and fully exploring in all sorts of directions on this. Then we come to what we call this metadata tagger architecture. So this is something we've built internally at Impulses. We're still going through that stages of validation. We will launch these services later in the year. But we were working with some publishers, obviously, because like anything, you need to work with data. You need to train it. You need to see what the outputs are. And I'll come to the reason for that. Obviously, it's accuracy, but I'll come to that reason. So if we look at just simply, I'm not going to go through everything on this diagram. It's not that's not the purpose. But a purpose is about what was, what we mentioned about that unstructured data, right? That big explosion of data, not just the books and the journals, but everything else, that's all unstructured, and giving it some sort of, so when we take that input, giving it some sort of processing. Normalization, maybe some other words can be used, harmonization. The normalization here we are using. And so we can look at the lexicon. We can look at if we want to do stop words removal or not, because depending on the sentiment then, and I'll come again to that explanation, and then processing it through, right, to the machine learning and natural learning paths, that the models that we would undertake to give us this metadata generator, where we can give that named entity recognition. We can give that, is it in the clinical, biomedical, general, we can then give the semantic features. We can also then see the sentiment on that as well. So is this a good thing? Is this happy or not, in the sense of the structure? Maybe I wrote an easy one would be a complaint, right? An unstructured email complaint comes in. We should pick that up as that sentiment of that as of not being happy, obviously, and be able to analyze across a database. Keywords and key phrases and so on. So just a few things that explain a bit on that diagram. And, I sort of said about the inputs that we're generating, we're taking in, so the XML, HTML, and PDF, and Word, and so on. The text analytics, so that name and entity recognition, the topics, key phrases, sentiments. It's kind of like just a little bit of a nicer slide of that, really, in a sense of how we model it, that key phrase extraction and that sentiment analysis. But obviously the use cases are, we want to, this is an enabler. So we want to get to use this data in some form or other. So it's to do with, a lot of it is to do with the discovery, fluent visibility, ensuring that when we've tagged all this content in a certain, processed in a certain way, we're able to provide these recommendations. We're able to generate those questions and answers on the automation workflow. We also have other things like predicting the terms, autocomplete, so that the user is writing, it obviously saves time. And then the intent of the search is important, because that's like the SEO optimization element. And we all love that word SEO. And, being able to recognize what you're trying to, the typos, for example, and recorrecting that. And machine learning, that's easy. And recognizing the sort of synonyms. So synonym would be like, happy and elated are the same thing, right? So search ranking and document similarity. So being able to cluster certain topics of documents together that were not necessarily in those camps, but through the processing, there is a similarity. So we're able to cluster those and make them visible on a single page and so on. And the other side really is, of course, another enabler is the profiling. Again, very important on the profiling, because, and if you're in retail, of course, it's super important. I mean, that's why I keep using these examples like Amazon and, Netflix, because they're obvious examples, because every one of us is using them. I think, in a sense of this, customer data and how we do the k-means. So, what we want to do in terms of the hierarchical order and the clustering and segmenting that customer, I guess, and the outputs and how we put those together. So that's just another tool that will enable us on the front end to kind of like serve you something that you would like, or help you get better with your objectives, be faster with your learning. So there are a number of different reasons. It's not all just on the learning side. It could be on a monetization side, because if you give me something I want, I'll buy it, obviously, it's what I'm looking for. So I think, and then we'll just move on. So with the solutions like text summarization, so again, think about it this way, really. So two types here, abstractive and extractive. So if we think about extractive summarization, we're basically taking that content, we are not modifying it. So we're extracting that content and taking those points. We're looking at the keywords, sentence position, sentence length, and we're extracting something very important as it is. Or the abstractive, where this is different. So we base it on, I don't know if you guys, bidirectional, let me see if I can remember, bidirectional encoder, representations from Transformers. So that's Bert. If I'd have said Bert, I don't know, but some of you might have recognized it. But so I think that's like how to learn the language, you know, as we would in a human mind, you know, present some sort of a summary of a document. Very important. So think about like looking at a chapter in a book and getting an automated summary out of that. Again, you need to train data. We need to be able to, so that's what we've been working on, we've been looking at, and we've been improving accuracies to quite a high level. So that would be the text summarization. Again, it's all to enable me to absorb knowledge faster. And that word knowledge, again, it's the string coming all the way through, is very important. And that's what we all need. We need to be served knowledge faster, quicker. I can absorb it. I can ask. I can be predictively, it will know what I'm looking for next. It will start to learn as I'm learning in a sense, because it knows my pace. It knows what I'm weak on. That's the AI and ML. That's the engineering part of it, if you like. But the business enablement side was important, the knowledge side, right? That reason we want to do it to, you know, if the learner objectives have got to be better, or if we want to monetize. So if you're into that sales side of things and being ahead of the competition and so on, and serving that in a much more streamlined way. So this again is actually quite interesting. The automatically generating a question and an answer. Okay. So if you think about any articles, journals, books, unstructured content. So we upload that content into our system. Let's say we give that, you know, deep learning model to it. We generate the metadata tags, and see, I see it as two models here. One internally for the corporate or the publisher, because actually it'll be very efficient, right? To cut some of the hoops out of an editorial workflow. We still need SMEs, by the way. So we still need the editorial expertise, because I think somewhere along the line, the human has to look at that and think, yeah, these questions are, you know, proofread it, right? Give it that editorial. But a lot of that, if you can serve up the complexity of it, can be also tweaked and tuned as well. So we can serve that up in a way. Then I think it saves a lot of time. It optimizes, hence that word optimization I used earlier. It optimizes that workflow. And of course, you generate that fast questions and answers. Now, it should become intuitive as well to me as a learner, or to me as an end user, or an employee. That's another one, right? Because they're a learner as well in every organization. We should be anyway. Should always be learning, whatever organization you're in. Hence why I've been here for 10 years. Anyway, but so, you know, I think we have to look at that as a really interesting model. And I mentioned before about this training data. And so, you know, this bilingual evaluation understudy we use as Blue, the algorithm for evaluating that text, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we're around that sort of 50 to 60%, which is, you know, good, very high standard. But, you know, we've still got to work in other domains, of course. So it takes time. That's why worldwide, I mean, everyone's looking at those that want to think about that, or understood that data side of it. We're into data. We're a technology company. It's our business. But, you know, if you think of that knowledge side of, because data equals that knowledge, and then basically how do we get to it, right? So we need a way of training that data. We need a way of confidence and reassurity that machine learning is getting to the point of being, you know, on a very, very high level. If not, let's say quality even better than a human, above 60. So interesting, right? So I'm going to summarize, because you know, I'm going to come to that. I mean, I could have gone into deeper on the AI. We could have had another expert, but I don't think that's the person of the webinar, really, to be honest. I wanted to really talk on that business enablement side. You know, I said to you, business first, the reasons first, and then look at the technology side of it. I mean, it's just all the neighbors. Like in Pelsis, we have built this, you know, innovation hub. We have built this, we're building in the middle of, you know, way past into sort of, you know, or let's say launching these products. And, you know, why have we done it? We've done it because we need to. It's part of our core business. We're in the knowledge business. We need to serve our, you know, customers and all our, you know, supply chain and everything in a much better way, let's say. So we're just thinking ahead. We're trying to stay ahead of the curve on that. So basically, but for you know, some things for the audience to think about is, it's a complex business, right? Preparation, very complex. So, and I think I'm seeing a lot of this. I mean, maybe accelerated by COVID as well. This year, we've been seeing a huge amount of traffic of this type of questions. Current landscape I'm talking about here. So infrastructure, current traditional methods. How are you managing all your content? You know, the authors, reviewers, product managers. content itself, looking at the different formats, looking at sort of how to sectorize that, let's say, and who you're serving up, because that ultimately is kind of like where you should be looking at first. Who are we serving here and what do they want, right? And observe that landscape and say to yourself, what is that framework like? How is that content production cycle? How is that product? Is it okay to have it uniform as one, like an ebook, or is it, or do we need to kind of like look at this in a more hierarchical view, like of all this unstructured data, and combine that with the traditional content? Platforms and solutions, I mean, that's our core business. I mean, like a lot of other companies, I mean, technology. So we have a solution for everything, right? A technology company, that should be the answer. We do. And then the business model, we should provide all the business models, of course. And that customer engagement experience for on your end should be very, very important. So, you know, you want this seamless experience. This user navigation needs to be non kind of linear, you know, it needs to be rich, immersive, that anywhere, anytime. I mean, this is just technology, anywhere, anytime. That personalization, what I mean here is not the personalization of the readers itself, but I'm talking about that end user personalization expectation, like, you know, serving me, giving me recommendations, how to collaborate better. Because once you've got that insights, we mentioned that word a few times here, haven't we? Then you will have a much more, I would say, business enabled view on how to take things forward. So, and this content, product, and metadata, I've focused a little bit on metadata because I think it's really important. So, you know, it's granular, it's interactive, it's, you know, that speed of production, and you can read it for yourself, but you know where we've already gone quite deep on the metadata side, and platforms and solutions are, you know, traditional stuff. We've got them all. So I think that is just a plug and play. And if you need to customize, then do customize. If you need to integrate, then integrate. You know, this is again, not having data in silos. So look at that. That's an important question. If all the data is in silos, then how will it immerse itself? How will it talk to each other? Unless you have a middleware or a business intelligence tool on top of it, that's good. I mean, that will help, but we still need a structured way to what we're going to throw this into, how we're going to treat it, and how we're going to look at that. But again, you know, looking at the front end of it, the business models, and, you know, I just put some of these splash of business models, but they're, you know, we pretty much cover anything. But I think, you know, from your end, how do you want to cover the business models? What I'm saying, I'm just using my slide. These are our normal go-to-market decks in a way, but, you know, essentially it's your business models, right? What do you want to do? And I think, like, you know, thinking about like, it's an immense value really waiting to be locked. Hence why that first slide of the segment of this webinar, data, the new gold, right? It's a bit of a corny kind of line, isn't it? But everyone's using it. But it's really, it's not, it's about that insights. It's about that business need first, then look at the AI use cases, of course, that knowledge delivery, right? How are we going to deliver that knowledge, that enablement of it, those layers you need to enable it, because it's not going to process and refine itself. Make it discoverable, make it visible. How do you differentiate yourself in the market? Giving that intelligence. So we can't do the intelligence without the insights. We need those insights. We need those trends. We need what's happening before, what's happening now, what's going to be happening in the future. We need to think about all that, and we need to optimize our workflow and drive that innovation. So we want these better learning outcomes. It depends what your market is and where you're involved in. The future of, the title was the future of learning, wasn't it? And, you know, this knowledge delivery, knowledge enablement, but learning could also be on a corporate side as well. I mentioned that before. I think that's critical as well. It's big. We're seeing a lot of it as a company ourselves, in terms of, you know, what we can provide as services there. If you think about just a traditional side of it on platforms, and then the actual content itself, how to interact, make it interactive and customize and enable it. But then if we have that AI and ML layer there as well, it'd be really interesting. Of course, if it's a monetization of opportunities, then that absolutely is a clear objective, right? So kind of like, we're coming to, you know, the end of where this segment and webinar is. We've almost done 45 minutes, which is pretty good, because I wanted to keep us that 15 minutes questions and answers, which Vinay can guide us through in a minute. And I think, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we have to embrace this world we're in now, and it's only been accelerated this year. Things hit home for a lot of people, and basically, how do we adopt to these new paradigms, and not just think about implementing new technology, but think about what we're trying to do in the business enablement side. and, and have a holistic view on it. So kind of like brings me to, I think, wraps it up quite nicely, I think, in a way. I hope, it was engaging on that side and has provoked some questions. I know Vinay would have been collating them while I was talking. Obviously, I haven't looked at the questions and answers that you might, or answers you might want provided. Yeah, I think over to you, Vinay. I think this is just my last slide, and let's take a look at any interesting, of course, selection of questions that we have here.
Thank you, Steph. Quite an interesting and engrossing session for all of us here. Yes, there have been quite a few questions which have come in. The first one is from Kevin. What is the difference between AI, machine learning, and deep learning? And it can also be supported by our colleagues, Ravi and Susmita too, please.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I often hear that, and funnily enough, you won't be able to see that on there on the whiteboard. I had the big circle of AI, and where machine learning and NLP sits, and where deep learning sits. But I think it's nice also. I think we've got a panel here, and that I think it's always nice to involve panel, and we can give sort of a point of view from our guys in the Innovation Hub. So Ravi and I think Susmita, whoever would like to, I think please if you like to give a more deeper explanation on the deep learning side and on the machine learning, would be good.
Yeah. Hi, Steph. So yeah, so there is a difference between machine learning, deep learning, and AI. So basically, AI is the broader sense where we say that AI is just to take decision. Inside AI, we have this machine learning and deep learning, where both machine learning and deep learning is used to take decision, kind of forecasting. So deep learning is applicable when we have a huge data. It is more suitable to cases where we have data in like trillions and billions. So we use a lot of layers and a lot of huge computation, and then we implement deep learning networks to take a decision. And then machine learning is for generalized decision making. So it might or might not involve deep learning. It generally does not involve or generally does not require a huge data to make any prediction or forecasting. So I hope it answers the question.
Sounds a good answer to me. Very formalized. Thank you, Susmita.
Yes, it does, Sushmita. Thanks for that. We have one more question, which it says, is artificial intelligence, AI, bias an issue? Is AI bias an issue?
That's an interesting one, Vinay. So, yeah, I mean, I think that could be a whole topic on itself, but I think what we're referring to here is baking in deploying bias at scale when undertaking this type of, let's say, machine learning. So I think we know that, all of us know that AI, make decisions based on training data. So essentially, what could be said is, could it include bias because, there's human decisions, or could there be some flawed data sampling that could contaminate, let's say, or it could even be, in some cases, kind of like malware, let's say, that could do that. So, yeah, I think for the purposes of our world, the publishing and the sort of corporate entity, and what we're trying to do here in today's discussion, I don't think the bias is too much of an issue. But let's say if we were in the other side of the world, let's say, or another topic area of, for example, facial recognition, that could be a problem, right? If we've trained data to be a certain way, then it may pick up on, there's certain groups could be, let's say, under or overrepresented, depending on how the data was trained. So there have been some issues in and around. Yes, I mean, we have to be more aware of it. One of the very interesting things that's going on at the moment is there is of course there's globally everyone's looking at this ethical use of AI, right? And IEEE themselves, the body IEEE, they're looking at the moment. It's going to take a little while. They're looking at, I think, working groups in session right over the last couple of years, and creating a series. I think it's called the P7000 series. So that series is to define a set of standards for AI ethics. So, you know, like you see how we've done technology now, like building security by design, privacy by design. It cannot be when we've all completed the product and then I put my hand up and say, hey, is this data secure? It has to be right at the beginning of the chain, before we've even started. So the AI ethics, likewise, should do the same thing for AI bias. I mean, in a sense of how to, because most organizations obviously don't purposely put bias anywhere, but at the end of the day, there's humans behind putting algorithms together, and yeah. So that's my take on it anyway.
Sure. We have one more question from Sophia would like to know, how exactly is knowledge graph going to help us, as in some sample user cases of its application in a smart way?
Yeah, well, the knowledge graph is really important. I'll let our guys in innovation add a couple of comments as well, but just quickly from me, it's really important. I mean, that's the mapping, right? That's the relationships. And we need to, in the start of any chain of events of, let's say, looking at content, and remember the unstructured data we talked about, especially, we need to be able to know how to treat that data, and what, you know, knowledge graph is a process. So that would be my kind of like layman way of putting it. But I think, let's say Ravi and or Susmita could give maybe a more defined answer. Then please go ahead. It's always good to hear from the experts.
Yeah, hi. I think I'll take that question. So knowledge graph has a lot of use cases. So I can, so just to make it clear, I can like mention one or two, as in like knowledge graph behaves very similarly to a traditional database, but what makes it different is it has relationships also stored in it. So the kind of scenarios where we have an enterprise data governance, as in like there are a lot of people, lot of entities, events, ideas, and then you have a lot of relationships among them. So in this kind of situation, having a knowledge graph across a like organization helps it, as in it helps to correlate the ideas or the concepts and to draw inference out of them. Also, one more like say use cases, popular use cases where we have a we want a customer 360-degree view maybe. So you want the you might have different views regarding a product. Maybe a product manager wants to understand what products customers are buying, whereas the marketing leaders might want to explore how the company is like came to the customer's attention to help, and all of this collectively helps them in taking a decision. So in situations where there are relationships involved, and there are like the ways in which different people perceive the same thing, we can help knowledge graph can help the users or the like end users to come to a conclusion together. So you have a different viewpoints, or you know how entities are linked to each other. So I can like discuss about a lot more use cases, but I think these are more prominent.
Sure. Thanks, Susmita, for that. We have one question from Satya. Satya, I have enabled you to ask the question. Please go ahead and you can ask the question too.
Hey, thanks, Vinay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead, Satya.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Steph, for this interesting session around the AI and ML. So I have a related question. Wherein the digital platforms today have a lot of malicious and fake data, which is mostly due to the could be to some extent with the social media usage and all that. So can AI or ML help us in the curing and purging such unwanted stuff and make the useful data available much faster when we need it?
Yeah, Satya, that's a really good question. Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's interesting. Well, you've heard of this thing, I think, going around globally, AI for good, right? So, there are a lot of innovations and a lot of outlooks out there for how to use it for good purposes. And that could be a really good use case. The same way of having, like, for example, in machine learning and, doing all sort of machine learning on the data sets, we can have something there that I think, how do we detect that fake news? How do we detect that kind of like malicious components. So again, I think in a probably more technical answer that our team could answer that better, I think. But yeah, I mean, there is globally, there are initiatives looking at that because it has a lot of serious consequences, right? I mean, we look at Cambridge Analytica, right? They only needed a couple of thousand data points, and you know, it's able to influence in a certain direction. I'm not saying that's malicious, but I'm saying that, you know, depends how you want to use AI, right? So, and the machine learning purposes. But I think it's a really good question. It's a session on its own. It kind of fits into the AI ethics. I mean, you know, it'd be really good that we would look, our team, our innovation hub, start to look at AI ethics as well, if not already. Susmita or Ravi, I don't know if you want to add any other comment to that, of any interest.
Stefan. Yeah.
Sure.
There are actually many companies who are working on this, like OpenAI and Facebook. Like normally Facebook actually, it processes like millions of fake news articles or like fake news in a day. So there are algorithms like GPT, which are particularly trained to detect these fake news. They work on many data points. They actually like mine different repositories, and they actually mine the internet to find the fake news and to differentiate between what is fake and what is true by validating not only with the AI, but there are subject matter experts who help who actually help in this.
Thanks.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Stefan, Ravi. Yeah.
Steph, we have a couple of more questions pouring in. I'll take a couple of them for you right now. Joy would like to know, what are the learning chatbots are available, or can it be useful to learning domain?
Well, yeah. So we're talking about like this on the like intuitive kind of chat box. So, you know, again, that would be very useful, right? So instead of having a more linear question, so, you know, when we go on those ones where customer services, there's a linear set number of questions and answers. So again, it's more on that kind of like profiling and I think recommendation that's given to us through a chat box. So, and if you think of it as omni-channel as well. So what I mean is if I start on a laptop, close my laptop down, forget about it because I'm busy during the day, but later on during the night, I go back on again when I have more time. That chat box should pick up from, hey, you know, you were looking at these things last time. I've thought about you might need this. You know, there's this personalization, and there's this relationship going on, if you like, rather than a linear question, a linear answer that is there, which is predefined, right? So the hierarchical case study almost predefined. So very, very interesting, very useful, and definitely, I think, you know, obviously in the retail world, but also in the learning world, it's a good question.
We have one more, Steph, and Ravi and Susmita. Given a long list of MI algorithms, how do you decide which one to use?
Wow. So there's an extensive list, right, Ravi and Susmita? So at the moment, what do we use? Open source, I guess, right? We started with the open source, but maybe you want to elaborate.
Okay. Yeah, Steph. Like all the ML algorithms are like, you know, depends on the data set we use, or it depends on the applications. So if you are building a application related to text, we normally use RNNs or LSTM. So if it is related to images, we use CNNs. And there, in CNNs and RNNs, there are many different types. So actually, machine learning and deep learning is trial and error. So we try multiple algorithms and we choose the simplest and the best one. Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi.
We have one more. How does Impulses gather and annotate data? This is from John.
So gather, and when you say annotate, I guess you would mean how do we tag that data, let's say?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that process. Kind of like one of my slides earlier on that metadata tagger process, but and you know how we are doing the NER, the named entity recognition, how we are, I suppose, extracting that information and grouping and clustering and doing that sort of profiling of that information. Kind coming to, I think, yeah, then from that, it's deriving, that's the enablement, right? Because if you don't, annotate or tag that data, then, then we won't be able to get to the services and solutions part of it. So yes, I mean, but technically, how do we do it? So that's another question I think we have to ask our guys. But in a commercial sense, and in the sense of view of business enablement, that's why we do it. But I'm not sure if the question was directed technically or business orientated.
Sure,
Not sure if anyone else wants to add to it, Vinny, Ravi, or Susmita, please, jump in and you can add the technical element to it.
Normally, majority of the times we use open source data. If the data or the application we are using is too domain specific, so we do have our own subject matter experts to annotate the data, and we also use crowdsourcing annotation frameworks like AWS, Mechanical Turkers and other things. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. Good answer.
We have one question from Jeetka. I have enabled you to ask the question. Please go ahead, ma'am, and ask your question.
Hi, my question was, what's the importance of a taxonomy?
Very, very important to have a structure, taxonomy. Yeah, I think if in any sort of training of data, right? So we need to have a structure and a way to elaborate and extract that data, right? So again, Ravi, I don't know, Susmita, maybe you want to kind of give a more validated kind of answer. Maybe that's kind of like.
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. Yeah, actually, it is very important to have a taxonomy when we are dealing with structured data. So you know that there is heart, and then in heart you have cardiology, and from that cardiology you have other branches. So it is very important to know what is related to what. So dealing with taxonomy is very closely related to like knowledge graphs, as I was talking earlier. So when you are dealing with data which is very domain specific and you want it to be very structured, we generally, the first approach to any solving a data science problem is always building a taxonomy. So yeah, it is very important actually, especially when you are dealing with a domain specific data. So does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Susmita. Adding to the same what Jeetka had asked, there are many open source taxonomies and ontologies. How is Impulse's knowledge graph different? Ravi, would you like to answer that? This question is from Smith.
Yeah. So most of the taxonomies and ontologies in the industry or open source are actually predefined. So if you just cannot give a new domain data and ask the ontology or the taxonomy to give the entities or give the connection between each entities. So we in Impulses actually we use semantic and syntactic meanings. We generate syntactic and semantic meanings between these entities, and we derive the connections, and we also use custom training data. No matter what domain it is, we can do it. Unlike ontologies and taxonomies, which are only to particular domain.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have one query from Joshua. He would like to know, can AI completely avoid manual or human intervention in publishing industry? Is it feasible in the coming future? Ravi, Susmita?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good question. So with the current technological advancements and the computing power, AI actually cannot completely avoid human or manual intervention, but it can help speed up the process or save a lot of time. Say in the question generation, we cannot actually avoid SME intervention over there. So we can just create a list of questions to them, so they can select or modify from the list. So this is how it works, at least currently. So in 5 to 10 years in the future, it may actually avoid human intervention like altogether.
Sure. We have, I think, time enough for about another two questions. Steph will finish with that.
Sure.
One of them is from Noor, and they would like to know, in terms of application, is AI better than traditional statistical methods?
It's a good question again. I think both have their place is the answer. So traditional statistical methods, I think I sort of alluded to earlier in my presentation where, you know, that's been around for a long time in sense of relational databases, having the business intelligence tools on top. But kind of like we've got to know what we're trying to extract and what information we're trying to gain out of it. So you kind of looking for you may not know the exact answer, but kind of like know the subject area answer and you're looking for, and you extract this report, you extract this. So traditional statistics, and there are, again, and what's the difference between that and AI is, well, AI is the huge data sets, right? And obviously the computing power of that and the AI mimicking that human intelligence. So that is the difference, but I think both have a role, certainly. And I don't see traditional statistical you know, methods going away. There are lots of BI tools out there that are really, really important. So, you know, I'm not sure if there's anything else, guys, in the hub that you might want to add on to that.
Yeah, the only advantage of AI or deep learning or statistical methods is the type and the size of the data they can handle. So currently, as you say, stuff like, you know, we are in the age where we process huge amounts of data every minute. So these traditional statistical methods cannot actually handle this. So that's the reason AI has a lot of scope right now.
I think that the last question, what we have is that how do we evaluate that we are constantly meeting the client requirements, and what strategies are helping us with regards to new assignments and approaches in AI and ML?
Well, that's a really nice topic, actually. I think that's what I said about look at the business needs first, that evaluation. So, you know, looking at that, let's say front end scope. So, for example, are the learners, are they getting through their learning processes? What are the results like? What is the mapping like? What is the competition like? And then, you know, trying to map a strategy to that. So as I said to you, you can't really get to that unless you start looking at all your data and sort of understanding where it's at. And are you serving? I mean, we're all serving, but are we doing it in the best possible way? You know, are we thinking of the future? So it's quite a big topic though. And I think the last few slides of my kind of presentation kind of get into that area where you look at the traditional side first, look at all the landscape, how we're doing currently, are we serving, and where do we want to be in the future? What's important to our business? Because one business will be different to another. So that answer will be different, but that's the knowledge enablement. So we know what to do. They're the business drivers. And then we can take forwards the technology we can put, but to know those answers first, really, the landscape and what you're doing and where you want to go to and what your users are thinking and doing. Maybe they don't know what they want to be served yet either, is a difficult question, but you need to model the data sets to get to that.
Got it, Steph. I think one last question before we wrap up the session. I'll enable Ravindra to ask the question. Ravindra, please go ahead.
Hello, Steph.
Hey, Ravi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. So how this AI can have an impact on the e-learning industry?
Yeah, so I think, Ravi, good question. I think it's a massive impact, really, in the sense of, you know, we talked about like, first of all, we've got to optimize that data like that, the way of doing that annotation, metadata tagging and side of things to get to, and profiling, and to get to that side of where the learner is. So think about that personalization, that recommendation, serving up Stefan, like for example, who's learning in the way he normally learns, giving Stefan that bit that he's not so good at and giving him more advice quicker to get there, serving that information, more autonomous questions and answers, testing me on the fly. So yeah, I think quite a lot actually, quite a big. It's a big, and that's hence why I mentioned. I think one of the stats from McKinsey was like nearly 50% growth in 2021 in the education sector by using AI. So for sure, it's a big impact.
I hope that that answers your query, Ravindra.
Yeah. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all our participants and Steph. I think it was a very interesting session. We would be coming back with many more interesting sessions all through August. Thank you to all my participants who joined this session. And thank you, Steph, for the same.
Welcome. It was a pleasure. Thanks everyone for joining. Cheers.
Thank you. We'll close the session now. Have a nice day.